Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Actrav Conversation. My name is Mamadou Kaba Soare. I'm the head of communication and publications at the ILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities, Actrav. Today, I'm pleased to welcome my colleague, Grayson Koyi. Grayson is our senior specialist in workers' activities and also the focal point on development cooperation and partnership. Welcome, Grayson, to this conversation. It's really a pleasure for me to have you with us. My first question to you, as you know, development cooperation is key as a mean of action for the ILO. But can you tell us what is development cooperation and why the participation of workers' organizations in the ILO development cooperation is essential?
Thank you, Mamadou. Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity for us to have this conversation around development cooperation. Simply put, development cooperation is the means through which the ILO delivers services to the workers, to the employers' organization, and to government. So it's a means for providing the services and for meeting the strategic objectives that ILO stands for. It comes in various forms. It comes through projects. It comes through technical assistance. And so this is basically a vehicle through which the ILO does provides its services to the workers, the governments, and the employers, indeed, in the advancement of social and economic development.
So you just explained that this development cooperation is key in terms of how the ILO is supporting the workers' organizations, but also the tripartite constituent in general.
That is correct.
The ILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities launched a new guide to support effectively the participation of trade unions and workers' organizations in the ILO development cooperation. What are the key messages emerging from this publication?
Well, thank you for that question. First and foremost, workers' organizations are key stakeholders in development cooperation, but they are also beneficiaries of development cooperation. They understand better the needs on the ground. And so it becomes very important for the workers to be able to participate in the various stages of the development cooperation cycle. And the work that we are doing in Actrav is to be able to ensure that the workers' organization are given the requisite capacities for them to be able to participate effectively in the development cooperation cycle. And so what we do and do realize is that the workers who understand the needs on the ground are given the space to be able to then input into the process of identifying the problems for which development cooperation is intended to resolve. And so what we do is basically trying to provide the space, the opportunity, as well as the tools and the knowledge that the workers' organization need to bring to the table in terms of the preparation of the project interventions.
Indeed, this publication is really most welcome. As you rightly said, the ILO's Bureau of Workers' Activities is here to provide services, but also support to workers' organizations. But when we come back to these development cooperations, can you tell us what are the key entry points for workers' organizations in the ILO development cooperation programs, but also projects?
Thank you. I think that a useful starting point is to conceptualize development cooperation as happening in a cycle of some sort, or the stages, if we have to put it that way. So the first stage relates to problem identification. Okay, so this is a stage where the project has to understand and conceptualize the problem that needs to be resolved. So that is the first stage, which is a problem identification. At that stage, we see a critical role for the workers' organization to have an input so that they can give a perspective and appreciation of the problem that the project is intending to resolve from their own perspective, from their experiences, and from their understanding. And so it is very crucial at that stage. So that is a stage of problem identification, which also involves essentially defining the problem. What is it? What is a dilemma? What is a perplexity that has to be resolved? What are the interventions that have to, plausible interventions that have to be formulated to be able to resolve the problem? All that comes under problem identification within the broader context of project design. So this stage of project design is very, very critical. So they have to play a critical part in designing the project that is intended to resolve the problem that is resolved. The second critical stage after design, obviously, is the implementation. Okay, so they have to play a role in the implementation of the project. Now, how do they play and how should they be able to play that role effectively? And this is where we bring in the message that there is a role for social dialogue in not only in the design of development cooperation, but also in the implementation and the management of the project. So the workers have to ensure that they are part of the oversight, the management, as well as the implementation of the project through, for instance, committees, advisory committees. And so they have to have their voice brought into the process of implementation and monitoring. When the project is done, there's another stage which has to do with monitoring and evaluation or review. Again, this is a stage that is very critical for the workers' organization to be able to give their assessment of whether the project has met their expectation or not and what needs to be done. So those are the very critical stages through which the project cycle runs its course, but through which the workers' organizations have to also play a part in those stages. The other part, of course, is the appraisal, which is more of an administrative dimension, and that ACTRAF comes in and support the workers to be able to give their input. But the bottom line is clear. Workers' organizations have to participate in all the stages of the development cooperation cycle to be able to ensure that their priorities are taken into account and their voice is brought to bear on the processes.
Thank you, Grayson. Indeed, knowledge generation is key in order to better understand, but also better involve and engage workers' constituents into the development cooperation projects and programs. The question that I want to ask you now is to know how can workers' organizations use effectively this product, these new publications that ACTRAV prepare and launch for them, how they can use it effectively.
Thank you. The guide or this publication is intended to provide the guidance of how they can effectively engage in a very user-friendly manner. So what we have done essentially is that we have put together key information, key resources. We've brought them in one kind of compendium. So if they want to know, for instance, what sort of questions they should be raising at the design stage, this guide gives them some sample questions, some guiding questions as to how they have to, what sort of questions are needed to be answered at the design stage, and what could be some key messages, some key dimensions that they should be looking at to be able to ascertain whether the design of a project effectively meets their needs. So, and when it comes to the implementation, again, we've provided some guiding questions. We've provided some kind of tips for them to be able to see and situate themselves effectively in terms of the implementation. What is it that they need to do? How they have to do it? And how do they then determine or assess whether they are doing that which is expected of them effectively? So it's a user-friendly guide that helps them know the kind of questions that they have to be asking, but also the kind of answers that they should expect to be provided when it comes to development cooperation design, when it comes to development cooperation implementation, when it comes to development cooperation monitoring and evaluation. So it's basically intended to help them, but also give them a sense of the responsibilities that the workers have as organizations, as key constituents in the ILO, the responsibilities that they have to do to ensure that development cooperation is responding or responsive to the needs of these worker constituents within the broader strategic framework and objectives for which the ILO exists and for the mandate that they have.
Grayson, as you know, when we talk about resource mobilizations, it is also a question of competition. Resource mobilization is very important, and this is something that we can do through this development cooperation project, as you explained. Let's imagine that there is one trade union representative from Zambia or from Bangladesh or from Guyana or from one country in Europe here who is watching this conversation. What could be your takeaway in terms of final message to him in order to better engage and to better prepare their implication into all the processes of the development cooperation? What could be your takeaway from this?
Firstly, I think that it is important that they are able to engage with the development cooperation process. If it is to respond and respond effectively to their expectation, they have to be clear about what they expect from development cooperation. And so it is very important. And to be able to render clarity to the role and the expectation that development cooperation has to play, we have colleagues that are stationed in the field that are on hand to be able to support the trade unions with the sort of technical support that they might need, for instance, when it comes to development cooperation. So we've got our decent work country teams, we've got technical specialists in the field that on hand to support the trade unions, to be able to answer the questions that they may have in terms of the technical dimension of development cooperation. And so it is important for us that they have a clear understanding of who they can approach in the field when it comes to issues of development cooperation. And so we've got technical specialists that are in the country, in a decent work country teams that can be approached. So it is important that they are in touch and in contact with the field offices, ACTRAV, but also it is important that they can also interface with us on a regular basis to be able to ensure that there's a regular exchange and information flow, so that we also have a clear concept of what are the challenges that they are facing and how best we can be able to respond. As it says, comprehension precedes understanding. And so we have to engage and ensure that we can co-create development cooperation. And in that co-creation process where there's ACTRAV, there's ILO, we can then be able to effectively meet and ensure that development cooperation effectively meets the expectation of the workers and indeed the workers' organizations.
Thank you very much, Grayson, for this conversation. Indeed, this is not the end of this conversation on the development cooperation. I just want to remind to our audience that today we are here together with Grayson Koyi. Grayson is our senior specialist in workers' activities and also the focal point on the development cooperation and partnership within the ILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities, ACTRAV. So thank you very much for watching, and definitely you will find these publications on the ILO's website. Stay connected with us, and see you soon for a new episode of ACTRAV Conversation. Bye-bye.